This video is brought to you by Miniature Market. Thousands of board games, discounted prices, miniaturemarket.com.
Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. I cannot believe that 2017 is just about over. Man, did this year fly by. Felt like just yesterday we were at the Gamma Trade Show back in March, seeing what was coming up for this year and making our most anticipated lists. So this is going to be my favorite games of the year, my best games in different categories. So without further ado, here we go. Now for children's games, I'm going to go with Dicey Peaks from Calliope Games, designed by Scott Almes. This is a press your luck dice game where you're trying to rise up to the top of a mountain, and it's going to have some interesting decisions based upon which dice you decide to roll. There's dice that are really good at climbing, some that's really good at resting, and some that are sort of in the middle. And you have to balance your ability to climb, but climbing uses oxygen, and there's multiple ways to bust. There's ways to bust while you're climbing, there's ways to bust while you're resting, trying to get some air, and there's also a Yeti that can come out. Now it has great decisions. It's a lighter game, but there are some good decisions built in. Now the game says ages 8 and plus, so this probably isn't for the smaller 4 to 5, 6 age children, but in that older, getting towards 8 to 10, this is a great game for those kids because it's going to give them a lot of great decision making. It's a fun, adventurous game. It's not too hard to understand, but it definitely packs a punch, and that's Dicey Peaks. Now my favorite dice game, typically this is a sort of a roll and write or a game that really just uses dice and you're rolling a lot and things like that. Now an honorable mention, my favorite roll and write game of the year was called 21. This was a game that I had to actually purchase overseas because I don't believe anyone has brought it to North America yet. And it's a nice little fun little roll and write game where everyone's doing things on everyone's turn, low downtime. 21, check that one out, but you probably have to get it from Europe. But for the dice game of the year for me, now I wanted to think a little bit out of the box this year. I didn't want to do a stereotypical roll and write style game for this. I wanted to think a little differently, and my dice game of the year is called Sagrada. Now it's a dice game of the year because the main mechanism in this game uses dice. Now yes, it is a drafting game. You're drafting these dice, but it's all about the dice, the color of the dice, the number of pips on that die. And throughout the game, you're going to be needing to pay close attention to the colors and those pips, but you're going to be able to use tools to manipulate those, like swap dice and re-roll dice and change pip values and things like that. So in and around, the game is designed around what dice do, which is pips, and in this case color, but it's also a drafting game for that. Now this is an amazing game where you're building this stained glass window. You're drafting dice from a pool of dice, and you're trying to place them in very specific spots on your board. There's going to be certain different boards have different rules as to where you can place them. Every game you're going to have a different board, so it's going to feel different. And the game is just really fun. It's quick. It takes about 30 to 45 minutes to play, but there's a lot of thinking in here and an interesting way to use dice in drafting and manipulating, and that's Sagrada from Floodgate Games. Now for two-player games, I had quite a big list of these. Let me just go over a few for honorable mentions, then we'll get to my pick. Honorable mention number 1 is the game called Claim. This is a two-player trick-taking game where it's basically 2 games in one. You're playing half the game to win cards that you'll then use to play tricks later. Check out my review for that. Another one is Tesla versus Edison Duel. This is an excellent tug-of-war that has some drafting, very tight two-player game, super streamlined, and also Pyramid Poker from R&R Games. This is a two-player game where you're essentially drafting tiles, so these big wooden blocks off of a pyramid and trying to have the best 2 out of 3 poker hands at the end. It is streamlined, elegant, it's awesome. But the number 1 is going to be Codenames Duet. Now the game actually cheats a little bit because the game actually can be played with more than 2, but since the game was designed for 2 and it's called Duet, I think it can make this list as the top. I loved Codenames, and this game I like even better than the original Codenames because it's cooperative. They've changed it up so it's got some deductive elements, knowing which ones are spies, which ones are good, which ones are just neutral, and there's this deductive element of knowing well, if this is a spy on my side, it's either a spy or a good or a negative on their side, and based upon what happens, you can use deduction to get that going. And I just love that you're working together. I love that they have a campaign built into this. If you like the original Codenames, this is the biggest no-brainer ever. My two-player game of the year, Codenames Duet. Now, my favorite reprint of the year, this is always a hard one because I don't want to just pick the best game that was reprinted. I want to pick one that in the reprint, they seem to have done the most with it, and it's a good game. Let me go over a few honorable mentions. First is Cartagena. This was redone by Rio Grande Games. This is a family-style racing game that's super streamlined, really fun, and Rio Grande did a good job in implementing some new mechanisms and new ways to play the game. Check out my review for that. New York Slice from Bezier Games. This was one that was redone from a piece of cake. And so they redid it and they streamlined it and they added different rules for the game to make it better. And then Manhattan was brought to us by Fox Mind Games. This was a Spiel des Jahres winner back in 1994. And they really cleaned up the artwork and make it look really nice now and modernized. But they didn't really do anything to change the mechanisms. Now to the winner. The winner is Downforce from Restoration Games. This was a game that has been by many different names, Daytona 500 and a few others, and I think it was even built back in the original 70s where it was just a straight line race, and it's been redone many times, and they knocked it out of the park here. It looks awesome. It feels awesome. It's streamlined. It's just an amazing racing game. This is probably the best family-style racing game I've ever played. It has an auction element where you're bidding for cars, and then you're trying to play cards to make your car win, but you don't have to win. Your car could come in last, and you could still win the game because you're helping other cars that you're secretly bidding on throughout the game. Amazing. That's Downforce from Restoration Games for the best reprint. For the best expansion, a few honorable mentions here. Cities of Splendor was awesome. That was the expansion for Splendor with 4 different modules. I've reviewed all of these. Jamaica the Crew. This is where you get to go into port and recruit different crew members that give you some special abilities. That was awesome. Deception, Murder Hong Kong, Undercover Allies, which added more cards and 2 new roles. Again, I've reviewed all of these. I'll try to place the links of all these in the reviews, in the notes below me. But the winner for me was 5 Tribes, Whims of the Sultan. This added a lot with these Sultan cards. It gave you completely different goals to get. Each of the times you go there, if you get the card, it gives you something else to focus on, to give you a different a diversion from your normal strategies. Plus, if someone can control a lot of these different cities, you can get over 100 points. So you got to be watching each other, what they're doing, but it also adds a completely new way to play the game. And that's why it's my favorite expansion, 5 Tribes, Whims of the Sultan. Now, artwork is a very subjective one. I guess in review world, everything is subjective, but this one I think is more than most. And typically I just try to find the one that has the most beautiful art. But this year I want to do something different because not that there isn't a lot of thought that goes into what someone does before they create this beautiful piece of art. But in this case, I'm going to talk about Ex Libris from Renegade Game Studios. And most importantly, the books. This is a game where you're a librarian and it's a worker placement game where you're collecting different books and trying to do some set collection. It's a very interesting game. Check out my review if you haven't seen it. But in this game, there's over 400 individual books that have artwork for them, and each of them have a creative, interesting name that fits the category of type of book that it is. Is it a spell and potion book? Is it a reference text? Is it a codices book? Is it all these different types of styles of books? And they found these names, and most of them have puns in them. And I can't even imagine the amount of time that it took to come up with that many different book names that fit, that are interesting. But then to put all those pieces of art together to match the fonts and do all this. So I'm going through the detail of the amazing time it took to put this art together and to think about the art before it went there. So all the 400 plus original artwork of the books in Ex Libris is my art of the year. Party Game of the Year, let me mention an honorable mention, that is Werewords. This is a fantastic game where it's basically 20 questions on steroids where one player is the mayor and they're able to essentially answer yes or no questions. Everyone else is trying to ask yes or no questions to narrow down to what the item or thing is. However, some of you might be werewolves throwing other people off, and there's some other special roles. Excellent game. Check out my review on that. But my winner for Party Game of the Year is Crosstalk from Nauvoo Games. This game is like Password, in reverse, where you're giving a clue, but the other team gets to guess first. And so you're trying to give clues that are vague enough that the other team doesn't get it, but good enough that your team gets it. And at the beginning, you get to write, the clue giver gets to write a private clue face down to their team to give them some sort of idea or concept to draw on, so that when they do give the vague clues, hopefully they can link that together and trick the other team into not knowing, but letting their team know. There's also an extra board you can play that really gamifies the game and makes it an advanced game as well. It can be played with both very casually or cutthroat, and it's just really well done, streamlined, and that is Crosstalk from Nauvoo Games. For Innovative Game of the Year, one honorable mention. This was called Beasts of Balance. This was a game that sort of, if you mashed up, Jenga with a video game app, that's what you'd have. You're stacking these different animals, and they're interacting with your app. And as you put animals on other animals, they crossbreed and create other animals, and you're trying to keep them all balanced. Very interesting and innovative. But mine for the year is one that just recently came out in September called Drop Mix. This is from Hasbro. This is a mass market game, but it's done by the same people, Harmonix, that did the Rock Band video game. And this is an analog card game where as you play cards, it's literally taking bits and pieces like a piano section of this song and a drum section of that song and a bass of this song and the vocals of this song, all these different songs. As you're playing cards, it's mashing them up together, changing the BPM, changing the key, making them all fit. And the experience is unbelievable. The technology and the innovation behind this. Every card has an RFID chip in it, and when you place it on the board, it just knows what it is and it plays it and it syncs everything together. The technology blows my mind. It is so innovative that it's an analog card game, and they've even figured out 3 ways to play. You can play freestyle with just making mixes. You can play a party game, which is like a real-time game, a real-time speed game, or you can play a strategic versus clash game where you go back and forth. The innovation behind the technology of this and integrating actually physically playing a card game and then having that all do that thing. It's like a mix of a toy and a game, and it was super innovative. The technology blew my mind. That's why this got Innovative Game of the Year, Drop Mix. Now, Components of the Year is always a tough one to do because it's never an even playing field, right? Do you just say, hey, it's the $150 game off Kickstarter that has these ginormous miniatures and is great, versus maybe this little Euro game that went over and beyond what a normal game at that price range would do? How do you do all this? So this year I decided I'm going to do something a little bit different. Instead of necessarily saying components, I'm basically calling this the best presentation of the year. What's the one that had A, the most table presence, B, the best packaging, the best looking feel, everything together, the best package. And for me, that was New York Slice from Bezier Games. I mean, the game, let's start with the box. The box literally looks and opens like a pizza box. And when you open it, it doesn't just stop there. The rules of this game literally looks like a pizza menu. I was at PAX, and this was sitting out in one of the demo areas, and I went and talked to the people playing it, and they were like, we literally thought this was a pizza menu. Like, we took it and we threw it off because we were looking for the rules. We just thought someone had left the pizza menu here. That's how perfect. It looks like one of those New York pizza menus. I mean, unbelievably forethought to think and and the love that was put into the look and feel of this game. And not only that, but the components themselves are great. They're these very thick pizza tiles. When the pizza's out on the board, it really does look like pizza. But the cherry on top that really makes this game shine even more is the score sheet is like a guest check, almost like in those old-fashioned restaurants where it would have the check number and it had the people's names on it. And it just, wow. The whole presentation, the table presence of this game is why this game got my presentation of the year, New York Slice from Bezier Games. Now, my card game for the year is called Custom Heroes by AEG. Now, this game uses a card crafting system, which was the same one that was originated in Mystic Vale, where you have the cards come with sleeves, and you place these transparent cards, and you level up these cards, and it's going to change the way the cards work. Sometimes it will add numbers, sometimes it will subtract numbers, sometimes it will give the card a special ability. And it's a ladder climbing game where you're playing cards, you're trying to get rid of all your cards as fast as you can, and you've got to play at least as many cards as that's there or exactly as many cards as there, but at least the number that's there or higher. And you're playing these through and you're trying to run out of cards, and at the end of the round, all the cards get shuffled up, dealt back out, and so the card that you just powered up and did something cool with, somebody else might have in their hand and do something different with it later as they add powers to it. The game has a great arc, it escalates great, it's a very unique concept, and I like those ladder climbing games in general, and this one just blows all the other ones out of the water, and that's Custom Heroes. Now for Family Game of the Year, let me talk about an honorable mention first, which is Barren Park. This is a Tetris-style puzzly game where you're drafting tiles, you're placing them on your board, and you're building up your own bear park. It's a ton of fun, plays 2 to 4 players. It's simple to teach, but has great layers of depth and lots of replayability. But the winner for this is called Dragon Castle. This is done by Horrible Games, and in the North America, CMON is bringing this first quarter of 2018. Now this game essentially is inspired by the computer solo version of Mahjong, where you're grabbing tiles of the same type and you're placing them on your own board and building your own castle. And if you get a certain amount of orthogonal tiles that are the same color, you'll consolidate them, flip them over, and start putting shrines on them, but then you're able to build on that level. And on that level, you're building this 3-dimensional castle. It's easy barrier of entry to learn, but the depth of the decision making in this game is amazing. The 3-dimensional spatial analysis, the drafting of trying to figure out when to take what to take that your opponent might use. Also, there's so much replayability built into just even the setup. There's many different ways to play the game with setting it up originally. They actually have many different examples of that. There's also different ways to score and different special abilities that can come out every single game to keep it different. So from the ease of use to the amazing look and feel of the game, to the tactileness of it, the art, the special abilities, the different setup, this is going to be a modern day classic that I will be playing for probably the rest of my life, honestly. This game is fantastic and why it won my Family Game of the Year. For Cooperative Game of the Year, I am going with Seventh Continent. This game is an exploration game where you're working together to try to get past certain curses. Now this game is grandiose. I mean, even just the first of the 4 curses in the game takes 15 to 20 plus hours to finish. I mean, this is one of those games where you'll be playing session after session, but don't worry, there's a saving system built in. This game is an amazing, immersive game, probably the best exploration game I've ever played. Probably maybe one of the most immersive games I've ever played, where you really feel like you're on this island, and you're trying to figure your way out, you're working with each other, you're going and exploring things. It's like a choose your own adventure book into a game where you're trying to choose this or this, tells you what card number to grab, your adventure continues, you're going off and finding new islands, you're finding equipment. You're building equipment to help you in hunting and doing different things and grappling hooks, and you can combine items together and you're going off and exploring. It is just an amazing experience that it's hard to explain what it feels like when you play. All I can say is, wow. It is an absolute treat to play this game, and that you can stop at any time and save it is really cool because you'll need to do that because it's really long. But overall, just the amount of game that's here is amazing. But even if just the first curse is all it was, this game still would have gotten Cooperative Game of the Year for me, and it's absolutely fantastic. Check out the Seventh Continent. Strategy Game of the Year for me is Pandemic Legacy Season 2. Now, Season 1 I liked very well, but it did not make any of my year-end lists. This one does. Why? Well, I love the fact that they took Pandemic and put it on its head, because in this game, the mechanisms are basically Pandemic almost in reverse, where you're trying to add supply cubes to areas so that they don't get plagues. And so, and that little switch might not sound like a lot, but it really makes the game feel very fresh. Plus, this game is all about exploring, going out and exploring and finding new areas on the board. It's not all built. And I really like that aspect of it as well. And plus, it's just a very solid strategy game where you're looking at characters, you're building characters up, different things are happening. Of course, it's got that legacy element where things are happening, you're pulling things out of boxes. I mean, on its own, the game's amazing, but the strategy aspect of it is great too. Lots of great decisions to make. Even before you play the game, you've got to decide where supplies go. After the game, you're deciding, with all this currency we have, how do we best spend it? So even on the bookends of the game, there's an amazing amount of strategy in just when you're not even playing the game. And then once you're in it, you have the normal Pandemic style strategy. But again, because it's on its head, it really won my strategy game of the year, and that's Pandemic Legacy Season 2. Now my game of the year, I'm not going to give it away here. Actually, later this week, I'm going to be doing my top 10 games of 2017, and I'll be listing it there. However, all the games I've talked about, honorable mentions and the winners of the year, I've placed links to my reviews below to check those out to learn more about them. So it's been a great, fast year, and awesome 2017. I'll see you later this week for my top 10.
This video was sponsored by Miniature Market's Review Corner. The Review Corner features podcasts, video, and written game reviews by gamers for gamers. Miniature Market, the online gaming superstore. Thousands of board games, discounted prices. Check them out at miniaturemarket.com.